The envelope wasn't meant for her. That was the only thing she was sure of when she found it resting on the marble steps of the gallery, thin as a whisper and marked with no return address. She should have ignored it. She knew better than to open things that didn't belong to her. But something in the weight of it, light yet deliberate, made her pause. And curiosity, when wrapped in silence, becomes irresistible. Inside was a single photograph, printed on heavy archival paper. Her fingertips froze the moment she turned it over, because the woman staring back at her was her, not a look-alike, not a clever manipulation. Her. She stood before a tall window draped in gold curtains, her posture soft, her gaze distant, her expression carrying a sorrow she didn't remember ever wearing. The room behind her looked expensive, marble floors, antique sconces, a skyline of a city she had never visited shimmering beyond the glass. She didn't own that dress. She had never been in that place. And yet the image felt terrifyingly intimate. Her breath caught when her eyes traced the bottom corner of the print, where a familiar signature curved in ink. Leon Hale, the photographer of millionaires, the man whose work lived in museums and private vaults, the man whose lens was precise, unyielding, and never accidental. Why would he photograph her? More importantly, when? She turned the print around, checking for dates, notes, anything. But the back was blank, clean, too clean, a wrong move. She shouldn't have gone to the gallery today. She shouldn't be standing alone with a snapshot of herself in a life she didn't recognize. The fluorescent lights above her flickered, as though reacting to the shiver crossing her skin. She swallowed hard. There was only one person in the city who could explain this, and he wasn't the type of man you approached lightly. Leon Hale's private studio was nestled behind a locked iron gate, hidden from the public eye, known only to clients whose names lived on magazine covers and stock market headlines. She had seen him once, briefly, at a charity exhibit. Dark suit, precise movements, eyes that studied people the way others study stars, mapping details, patterns, stories waiting to be exposed. He had barely looked at her, or so she thought. Now this photograph suggested otherwise. She slid the print back into the envelope, her pulse quickening in her throat. The gallery's polished floor seemed to echo each of her steps as she walked toward the exit, as though the building itself was urging her to leave. Outside, the late afternoon sky had dimmed into a muted amber. She hesitated only once before making her decision. She would go to Leon Hale. She would show him the impossible photograph, and she would demand to know how and why he had captured her in a place she had never been. But she had no idea that by seeking him out, she was stepping into a story far darker and far more intimate than she ever imagined. A story that had begun long before she opened that envelope. Leon Hale's studio sat at the far end of a quiet street, hidden behind wrought iron gates and a wall of climbing ivy that muffled the noise of the city. His world was designed to be unreachable, almost sacred. She hesitated at the intercom, the envelope clutched so tightly in her hand that the paper had begun to bend. What if he denied everything? What if the signature was forged? Or worse, what if he did take the photo? Her thumb pressed the call button before she could overthink it. A moment of silence. Then a low voice, smooth yet clipped. Yes? Her breath faltered. Leon Hale. I need to speak with you. It's important. Another pause, longer this time, thick with suspicion. Then the gate unlocked with a mechanical hum. Inside, the courtyard was dim, lit only by the amber glow leaking from the studio's tall windows. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. There he was. Leon Hale stood by a long table of negatives, sleeves rolled up, collar loosened, as though he had been wrestling with hours of work. The air carried the scent of chemicals, old paper, and something undeniably him, a quiet, masculine sharpness. He lifted his eyes, and the room shifted. There was a way he looked at people that made them feel transparent, as though he could see not just their faces, but the thoughts behind them. But this time, when his gaze settled on her, something like recognition flickered, followed quickly by confusion. "You're—" he began, but she cut in gently. I need you to look at this. She extended the envelope toward him. Leon wiped his hands on a linen cloth before taking it. He opened the flap, expecting something ordinary, perhaps a request, an invitation, a complaint. But the moment the photograph slid into his hand, his expression shattered. His jaw clenched, his eyes darkened. A muscle beneath his temple twitched like a warning signal. That was the moment she realized something. He wasn't surprised to see her in the photograph. He was horrified. Leon turned the print over, checking for marks she had already searched for. His fingers moved with the precision of someone evaluating evidence, not art. "This was delivered to you?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "No sender, no explanation. And you've never been in this room?" His voice was low, almost too steady. "I've never even seen it." Leon exhaled slowly, as if forcing air into lungs that had just collapsed. "This isn't possible," he murmured. "I didn't take this." She blinked. "But your signature is real," he interrupted, eyes flicking to hers, "but the photograph isn't." He stepped back, pinching the bridge of his nose, pacing once, a man trying to solve an equation with missing pieces. "There are only two people in the world who have access to this signature," he muttered, half to himself. "Me and someone who stopped working for me a long time ago." She felt the room tighten around them. "Why would someone send this to me?" Leon met her gaze again, and this time no mask, no distance, no professional calm could hide the truth. Fear, not for himself, for her. Before he could answer, the studio lights flickered sharply, once, twice, then snapped into darkness. The hum of the city outside fell away. An engine rumbled somewhere nearby. A shadow moved across the frosted glass of the front door. Leon whispered, barely audible, "Don't move." He reached slowly for a small light on his desk, switched it on, and its beam cut through the room. Every drawer was open. Film canisters had been scattered across the floor, and on the wall, pinned with a silver clip, was another photograph. Another picture of her, this time from behind, walking into her apartment building just 2 nights ago. She felt her veins turn to ice. Leon stepped closer, his voice low and controlled. "Whoever sent you the first photo has been watching you for longer than you realize." He turned the light toward the door, jaw tightening. "And they were here," he said, "less than 5 minutes ago." The small beam of Leon's light swept across the ruined studio, overturned boxes, negatives spilled like fallen feathers, and the single photograph of her pinned to the wall like a warning or a claim. The air felt heavy, humid with chemicals and something colder, intrusion. She stepped closer to Leon without realizing she had moved. His voice dropped. "Don't touch anything." Whoever was here knew exactly where to look. Her pulse throbbed in her ears. The stranger hadn't come for money, not for equipment. They had come for her. Leon crouched near the table, picking up a strip of film with cautious fingers. It was cut cleanly down the center, a surgical precision that made her stomach twist. "This is my private archive," he murmured. "No one should even know it exists." She swallowed. "Then how did he get in?" Leon's jaw tightened as he turned the cut film over in the light. "He used to work for me," he said. "An assistant, brilliant, obsessive, unstable. He sharpened his talent on my techniques until he could mimic my style effortlessly, too effortlessly." Her breath hitched. "Why did he stop working for you?" Leon hesitated. Not for long, but enough. "He crossed a line." She didn't ask which line. The room told the story well enough. His eyes flicked back to the photograph pinned to the wall, her walking into her building, 2 nights ago. "But how does this involve me?" she whispered. "Why me?" Leon turned the photo over. On the back was a single symbol, drawn with black ink, a circle with a line through it like an eye partially closed. His expression hardened. "He calls himself the Collector now." Her stomach knotted. Leon continued, voice low and controlled. "He photographs what he wants. People, moments, possessions. Once he captures something, he believes it belongs to him, whether it's an image or a person." She felt the blood drain from her face. "So he's obsessed? With you?" Leon lifted his eyes to hers. Yes. The room spun slightly. She steadied herself on the edge of the table. But why would he send the first photograph? Why send something impossible? Leon hesitated again. Then he spoke carefully, each word a weight. Because he wants you confused, vulnerable, a little unbalanced. He believes emotional disorientation makes people easier to shift into his reality. She frowned. Shift? He recreates people, Leon said quietly. He builds entire worlds of staged scenes, locations he constructs, outfits he replicates, memories he rewrites by fabricating images. He's done it before. Her chest tightened. So that first photograph isn't real? Leon shook his head. It's real, but it's constructed, staged. The room, the window, the dress, they're replicas. He built them somewhere, which means... He placed the photo gently on the table. He has a version of you somewhere, in a space only he controls. A cold shiver crawled up her spine. She reached for her coat, wanting nothing more than to get away from that dark studio and its suffocating silence. But the moment her fingers touched the fabric, Leon's hand wrapped around her wrist, not forceful but urgent. You can't go home, he said. His voice was soft, but the warning in it was unmistakable. She stared at him. Why not? Leon stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because if he was here minutes ago and he left a photo from 2 nights ago, then he's been mapping your routines, tracking your steps, studying you. She felt her heart stutter. He knows where you live, Leon finished. He knows where you sleep. Her throat tightened. So what am I supposed to do? Leon's expression shifted, something protective, something she didn't expect. You're staying here, he said, where I can keep you safe. The room fell into silence. Outside, a car engine started, not loudly, quietly, as if someone parked nearby had been waiting just long enough. Leon turned his head toward the window, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. Rain returned that evening, thin needled drops that blurred the city lights into trembling halos. Celine pressed her forehead to the cool taxi window as Manhattan drifted by in ribbons of gold and violet. She kept replaying Adrian's confession in her mind, the shadows in his past, the betrayal that had cost him more than a career. But there had been something else, a truth he almost said, and then stopped. The taxi slowed in front of the discreet address he'd given her, an old penthouse building overlooking the river, its entrance protected by a brass gate and a doorman who seemed to recognize her instantly. Ms. Moreau, Mr. Blackwood is expecting you. Her pulse tightened. Inside, the elevator rose in silence, carrying her to the top floor. The doors slid open to a private hall lit by a single pendant light. She stepped forward, and a faint sound reached her, a piano, soft and deliberate like the first breath before a confession. Adrian was waiting inside. The penthouse was unlike his studio. This space was all shadows and low amber lighting, warm with the scent of cedar and something faintly smoky. Shelves were lined with vintage cameras, old film rolls, and framed photographs of people whose eyes held entire storms. Celine stepped closer to one of the portraits, an elegant woman in a dark dress, her expression unreadable. Her name was Mara, Adrian said quietly behind her, his voice low. The woman who taught me what ambition can cost. Celine turned slowly. And what did it cost you? He exhaled, eyes drifting to the rain-streaked windows. Everything I thought I was. There was a vulnerability in him tonight, a quiet crack in the polished facade he usually wore like armor. For the first time she sensed he wanted her to see it. He gestured toward the grand piano. A folder rested on its edge. Her heart tightened. The contract? She asked. Yes, he murmured, but not the one you think. She opened it and froze. Inside was a story. Her story. The images he had taken of her in the studio, but also sketches, scenes he planned to shoot, scenarios built around her expression, her presence, her way of carrying silence like it was made of velvet. It wasn't a job. It was an obsession. You built an entire project around me, Celine whispered. I didn't build it, he said. I discovered it. When you walked into that frame, everything finally made sense again. Her breath caught. But beneath the flattery, beneath the intensity, lay something far more dangerous. The truth that Adrian Black would never let someone into his art without binding them to his world, on his terms. She closed the folder. "And what do you expect from me?" His gaze deepened, dark, magnetic, almost tender. "To trust me," he said, "even when you don't understand me yet." Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating his silhouette. For a moment she felt the pull between them, a thread drawn tight, humming with a tension she couldn't name. But a question flickered in her mind, sharp as broken glass. If Adrian was telling her the truth now, then what was he still hiding? She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Then show me, Adrian. Show me what you're not saying." His jaw tightened. He looked away, and that was when she realized it. There was someone else in the story. Someone connected to the woman in the portrait. Someone very much alive. And whatever secret Adrian was guarding, it wasn't about the past. It was already unfolding around them. Thunder rolled across the city as Celine wandered deeper into Adrian's penthouse, her fingertips gliding along the edges of polished frames. Each photograph felt like an unopened letter, dense with emotion, unfinished, waiting. Yet one image caught her attention more violently than the rest. It sat half-hidden near the corner of the room, propped against a leather armchair, as if Adrian hadn't meant for anyone to notice it. A portrait, a woman, but not the elegant, haunted Mara. This woman looked strikingly, disturbingly familiar. Celine knelt to get a closer look. The model in the photo had her same profile, the same shape of her jaw, even the same delicate slant at the corner of her eyes. But the woman wasn't her. She was older, dressed in a vintage gown, photographed on film so old the edges had begun to fade like smoke. A chill rippled across her arms. "Adrian," she called softly. "Who is this?" He didn't answer right away. His footsteps approached slowly, almost reluctantly, like a confession forming one painful syllable at a time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, careful, guarded. Her name was Alina. Celine's heart stuttered. "She looks like—" "I know." The storm outside cracked open with a flash of white. Adrian's shadow fell over the portrait as if he were trying to shield it from view. "She was my muse," he continued, "years before everything fell apart, before the scandal, before Mara, before the world started calling me cursed." Celine looked from the portrait to him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you weren't supposed to find it." There it was. The truth laid bare, not as an apology, but as a consequence. He sank onto the arm of the nearby sofa, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she'd never seen from him. Frustration laced with fear. "Alina disappeared," he said. "Vanished the night we finished the series. No notes, no clues. Nothing but the images we made." Celine felt her breath hitch. "You think something happened to her?" "I don't think," he murmured. "I know." The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thickening like the pause between heartbeats. "But what does that have to do with me?" Celine asked. Adrian lifted his gaze, and in it she saw something she wasn't prepared for, a deep, unsettling certainty. "Because when you walked into my studio," he said, "you moved exactly the way she did. You held tension in the same places. You even hesitated before I pressed the shutter the same way she used to." He swallowed. "I thought it was coincidence, a trick of my mind, until I developed the film." Celine's stomach tightened. "What did you see?" He hesitated, then reached into a drawer and handed her a contact sheet. She held it under the lamp, her pulse hammering. There she was, herself, captured in delicate grayscale. But in one frame, barely visible, almost dissolved into shadow, a second silhouette. Behind her, watching. She nearly dropped the sheet. "Adrian, what is that? Who is that?" "I don't know," he answered, but his expression said otherwise. He had theories, fears, ghosts he hadn't named. Suddenly the room felt colder, as though a draft had slipped beneath the windows. The lights flickered once, a shiver of electricity drifting through the penthouse. Celine hugged the folder close to her chest, her voice trembling. Adrian, Mum, is this why you wanted me to trust you? He took a slow step toward her, his presence warm despite the storm. It's why I need you to, he said quietly, because whatever happened to Alina, it's starting again. Lightning flashed, bright, merciless, casting their shadows against the wall. For a heartbeat, Celine swore she saw 3 silhouettes instead of 2. She blinked. They were gone, but the impression lingered. Something unseen had entered the story. Something that wasn't finished. Something that had been waiting for her. The storm had reached its crescendo. Rain hammered the windows in frantic rhythms, and the city below looked like a drowning constellation, lights trembling beneath sheets of water. Celine stood in the center of Adrian's penthouse, the contact sheet still clutched in her hands, her pulse echoing the thunder. Whatever happened to Alina, it's starting again. His words crawled through her mind like a thread of ice. Adrian, she whispered, tell me everything, no more half-truths. He exhaled, a long, unsteady breath that seemed to pull shadows from every corner of the room. Then he crossed to a locked cabinet, produced a small key from a chain around his neck, and opened it. Inside was a stack of old film canisters and a single envelope, its paper yellowed, edges frayed, as though it had survived fire and time. He handed her the envelope. That's the last thing Alina ever gave me. Celine opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single photograph, black and white, soft grain. A stairwell, Alina descending. Her face turned slightly over her shoulder, and behind her, that same silhouette. The same shape she had seen lurking behind herself in the studio images. Celine's breath fractured. So she saw it too. She did, Adrian said quietly. And she became convinced that whatever it was, it had attached itself to my work. To me. He turned toward the rain-dark window, jaw tight. The night she vanished, she told me she felt like she was being followed, not by a person, but by an unfinished story. Celine felt the weight of those words. An unfinished story. A narrative that clung to muses like a curse. She stepped closer to Adrian. Why didn't you stop working? Why did you keep photographing? His eyes met hers, haunted and raw. Because the only way to lose fear, he whispered, is to understand it. And because every muse who stepped in front of my camera brought me one step closer to the truth. Her chest tightened. Then why me? Thunder cracked, shaking the glass. Because you didn't walk into my life, Adrian said. You stepped into a frame I had already taken years ago. Celine froze. What do you mean? He retrieved one last photograph, a contact print from an abandoned project. The image was of an empty alley bathed in morning light. A piece of paper fluttered on the ground. It was nothing special, until she looked closer. In the far corner of the frame, blurred, barely visible, was a woman. Her posture unmistakable, her silhouette identical. Her. But the photo was dated 4 years before Celine had ever met Adrian. No, she whispered. That's impossible. When I developed that role, Adrian said softly, I thought it was an illusion, a trick of the light. But then you walked into my studio that day, and I realized the frame was waiting for you. Her knees weakened. The room felt too small, too bright, too dark all at once. This is why you made that contract, she said slowly, to keep me close, to study me, to understand why I appeared in an image before you ever knew my name. Adrian didn't deny it. Instead, he stepped toward her, slow, cautious, as though afraid she might shatter. I wanted to protect you, he murmured. But when I saw the figure appear behind you in the film, I realized I might be the one endangering you. Silence fell, dense as velvet. The storm outside muffled to a low rumble as if the world were holding its breath. Celine swallowed hard. So, what now? What happens to us? To this thing following me? Adrian reached for the folder between her hands, tracing the edge with his thumb. We finished the story, he said, on our terms. We stop being characters inside it and become its authors instead. Her heartbeat steadied, not with certainty, but with a strange, fierce resolve. "And the silhouette," she whispered. Adrian's lips curved into a shadowed, quiet smile. "We give it an ending." Another flash of lightning lit the room, illuminating their reflections in the glass. Two figures standing close, and behind them, for the faintest second, a third. Celine didn't flinch this time. Whatever watched them, whatever waited in the spaces between their frames, would no longer dictate the narrative. She lifted her chin, eyes steady. "Then let's begin." And somewhere in the depths of the penthouse a shutter clicked, not from Adrian's camera, not from any device she could see. A sound like a story choosing its next scene. A sound that promised their darkest chapter was only truly beginning. If this story pulled you into its shadows, then step deeper. Subscribe to Velvet Shadows for more narratives where desire and danger walk hand in hand, where every secret has a pulse and every moment lingers like a whisper in the dark. Let the next story find you. Welcome to Velvet Shadows.